In this video, we're going to be focusing on adding, subtracting, and multiplying polynomials before we go into factoring polynomials. So this should be a review. So what I want you to notice here is in adding, I'm going to add my f function, which is right here. So I can substitute that out. And my g function, which is right here. Okay? So notice I'm just going to follow this format. So my f function, I'm going to write it like this. The quantity of my f function is x squared plus 2x minus 3. And I'm going to add my g function, which is 2x squared minus 3x plus 1. So when I'm adding, I'm just combining like terms. So I might rearrange this so that my f function is x squared plus 2x minus 3, and my g function is 2x squared minus 3x plus 1. So here I'm going to add up my green function is going to be added to my blue function. So all I'm doing is combining like terms. So that means when I add them up, negative 3 and 1 gives me negative 2. 2x and negative 3 gives me negative x. And x squared and 2x squared gives me 3x squared. So what I want to point out is notice how my exponents stayed the same. I'm just adding like things. I have this thing and I'm adding 2 more of those things, so I have 3 of those things. That's all you're doing when you're adding. So let's talk about subtracting. Subtracting is very similar, but you have to be careful. You have to watch out for this minus here, because I didn't quite give myself enough room and I'm kind of encroaching on my subtracting. I'm going to write my functions underneath here. So my f function was my purple function, so I'm going to write that as x squared plus 2x minus 3. And then what am I doing? I'm subtracting my g function, and my g function, notice I'm going to put it in parentheses, 2x squared minus 3x plus 1. So the thing that you need to pay attention to right here is that this is the same as negative 1 times that g function. Another way of looking at it is I'm going to take the opposite of everything inside the parentheses. Sorry, I didn't close that. And then I'll add them together. So what happens on this side over here? I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to rewrite this. That's the same as negative 2x squared plus 3x minus 1. So how did I do that so quickly? I'm going to take the opposite of the positive, I'm going to take the opposite of the negative, and I'm going to take the opposite of the positive. Notice once I distribute that negative, I no longer need those parentheses. So this here is simply x squared plus 2x minus 3. And then I'm going to combine it with that. So let's put this underneath like I did here. We're going to line up the same things. So my first term here is negative 2x squared, then I have a plus 3x, and then I have a minus 1. So what have I done? I've turned my subtraction problem into an addition problem by combining. I'm now going to combine these two. So if you remember the order of operations, this here is telling me that there's a multiplication happening, so I had to multiply, which is the same thing as distribute, and I'll write distribute here, which is the same thing as multiplying. So then once I distributed, I no longer needed the parentheses. And I'm going to show you why that's important in the very next example. So here, when I add these two together, I get negative x squared. When I add these two together, I get positive 5x. And when I add these two together, I get a negative 4. So you can see adding f and g gives me a totally different answer than subtracting f and g. So then the other thing that I wanted to point out, which I'm getting ready to do, is be very careful when you're multiplying. So now I'm going to show you multiplication. So let's write down here, we're going to be multiplying f of x times g of x. Remember, this is nothing more than telling the name of the function. So remember that my g function was green and my g function was yellow. So when I'm multiplying, my f function was what? X squared plus 2x minus 3. So this could be written to be x squared plus 2x minus 3. Then I'm going to multiply that times my g function. My g function was 2x squared minus 3x plus 1. Okay, so notice how I have a parentheses with something inside and a parentheses with something inside. When there's no operation in the middle, it means multiply. So I have a trinomial times a trinomial. So that's another vocabulary word that you need to know. So trinomial means 3 terms or 3 names. So tri means 3 and nomial as in terms or names. So there's 2 ways I can do this, but I want to keep it clean. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to write my f function on the top, and then I'm going to write my g function on the side. Okay? And some of you had done this before. It's just a refresher. So now I'm going to set up my box, and what I like about the box with multiplying, when I have especially a trinomial times a trinomial, is that I can make it very neat. So what I'm looking for now are areas. So each area is one side times the other side. So if I have x squared times 2x squared, I get 2x to the 4th. Notice how my exponent has now increased. 2x times 2x to the 4th gives me 4x cubed. Negative 3 times 2x squared gives me negative 6x squared. Now I'm going to find these areas by multiplying, again, this side with this side. So on the top side we have x squared times negative 3x. That gives us negative 3x cubed. Then I have 2x times negative 3x. That gives us negative 6x squared. And then I have negative 3 times negative 3x. That gives us positive 9x. Lastly, I'm going to multiply everything along here by 1. So 1 is the easy thing to multiply by. Notice I keep my operations with me. Okay? So now when we set it up like this in the box, we have that infamous peanut that usually shows itself. Those are like terms. Oh, this is one of those rare peanuts. Sometimes you get 3 peanuts in the shell. Okay, so those are like terms. These are like terms. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add up the insides. So just quickly, the first step is I multiply the outsides to get the inside. And then the second step is then I add up all the insides. Okay? So that's how we're going to do this. So my peanut is going to help me. So the first box I come to is 2x to the fourth. Then these are like terms, so negative 3x cubed and 4x cubed gives me a positive x cubed. Notice when I'm adding, my exponents are just things. They just go along for the ride. Now when I do this, I'm going to be careful. Negative 6 and negative 6 is negative 12. And then I have a positive 1, so that gives me negative 11x squared. Then I have 2x and 9x, and that gives me positive 11x. And then I just have my negative 3 in the bottom. So that was multiplying. And you can see, when you multiply, your exponents are going to increase. When you add or subtract, your exponents are going to stay the same. So you've seen with two functions, f and g, how I could add them, how I could subtract them, and how I could multiply them.